Good afternoon, everybody. Well, look, thank you so much, Dirk, for the kind introduction. I don't know if there's more experienced lawyers in the UK. I take his word for it. But look, I'm honoured to be speaking here. It's my first Mary Jane, and I've gone to a lot of conferences around the globe to do with cannabis, particularly when it comes to the European market, and I'm overwhelmed by the size of this conference. Before we dive into the next panel, and before I go into my slides, I just want to give you a brief introduction. I wanted to take the moment to reflect on the journey that was brought us here today. The cannabis sector has seen remarkable growth and transformation over the past few years. What was once a taboo subject has now become a legitimate industry. You know, it's still an emerging market. Let's not get, over and above that, even though when we've got 60,000 people walking around, still an emerging market, but we've come a long way. The shift in perception is a testament to all the hard work and those in the industry and those that are trying to move policymakers, and there's still a lot to go. As we gather here today, we are not just celebrating the progress we've made, but also acknowledging the challenges that lie ahead. The path to full acceptance and integration of the cannabis industry into a mainstream society is fraught with regulatory hurdles, societal misconceptions, which I'll go into in a bit more detail, and economical barriers. However, it's through events like these that we can come together, share experiences, and work towards a common goal. Having travelled extensively, as I just said, and engaged with stakeholders from various countries, I have witnessed firsthand the diverse approaches to the cannabis regulation, from progressive policies in Canada, cautious steps in Europe. Each region presents a unique challenge, but also opportunities. As we move forward, it is crucial that we address the regulatory challenges head-on by fostering transparency, harmonization, and collaboration. We can create an environment that supports innovation, investment, and patient access. The cannabis sector has the potential to be a major contributor to economic growth, political, public health, but only if we work together to achieve that. So just before I go on, let me just do a brief introduction of who I am. Dirk mentioned I'm a lawyer from the UK. I've got 17 years experience in law. Within the sector, I've been working for about 5 years, have assisted clients across the globe with the support with other lawyers in those countries. And some of the things that I've worked on is from the early stages when it came to CBD products. I was involved in vaping products, cosmetics. That shifted quite quickly in late 2021, so we're still going through COVID, and medicinal cannabis products, also food supplements and food products alike. So, I've got extensive, I'm touching the industry from various different life cycles. I haven't touched is industrial hemp and the wealth of opportunities that sector also brings to the market. But enough about me. Let's move on. Legislatively lag, as I've put it there. Look, despite many countries' legalization of medical cannabis, with Germany in 2017 and the UK in 2018, practical implementations remains limited. Although Germany has moved significantly in relation to patient access, and to give an example, Germany was only 1 year ahead of the UK. Germany owned hundreds of thousands of patient access, whereas the UK sits around about 45,000 patients. So it's 10 times, maybe 15 times different, with Germany only 12 months ahead, right? And talking about the UK, in the UK, the patients face significant challenges accessing through our national health systems prescriptions, and have to go down the private route, which is quite expensive for them. And added to the regulatory oversight, such as what we've got in the UK, is the Proceeds of Crime Act, which we refer to as POCA, and because of those activities, companies suffer severe penalties for accessing funds from a regulatory market, such as in Canada, where recreational cannabis is legal. I was recently actually with colleagues of Dirk about 6-7 weeks ago in Capitol Hill, speaking at a conference. And even though the US, we're talking about 2017, 2018 for our counterparties here, even though the US is decades in front of that, I was still very disappointed to see that even today the US continues to have disconnect between state and federal legalization, right? And the regulations, which is preventing a fully functional market. While 38 states have legalized various forms of cannabis, it remains a Schedule I substance under federal law. There are discussions that there is going to be a move to move that to Schedule III, which becomes more of a medical cannabis discussion rather than a recreational discussion. It makes policymakers, it eases that whole discussion with policymakers and stakeholders that it's Schedule III, not Schedule I. And so let's see. But it's still a long progress, even for the US. So if I just move on. So whilst we see here that Germany, as I just discussed, has made significant strides in enhancing patient access to medical cannabis since its legalizations, concerns are still mounting as to whether your new government is going to slow down that progress or reverse it in some way. Yet to be seen. I don't want to be the person that gives bad news here on stage because of what's happening in Germany, but we don't know, right? And as just discussed, in the UK, the lack of cohesion among government departments creates significant barriers. So we've got the Department of Health and Social Care that oversees cannabis-based medical products, while the Home Office enforces strict drug policies. And then what I was discussing just moments ago, remember there's only a year apart between our two countries legalizing, yet you're hundreds of thousands of patients and we're still tens of thousands of patients, which is ludicrous in my view. Why? I don't know why the reason for that. My only, having worked in the industry for 5 years, I suspect it's a disconnect from politicians to civil servants to allow that educational piece to happen. Also, the issue with the UK is our national health system is completely free and there are no subsidies that allow that patient access. The only ones that are getting patient like medical cannabis on some sort of prescription that's free of charge are those young children, and now some of them young adults, that were receiving medical cannabis for matters of epilepsy and dealing with that. So we're talking literally a handful, 5 or 6 patients that are receiving that. There are 30, as I understand from readings, there's 35,000 children that are suffering from epilepsy, but we shouldn't concentrate just on children and access for medical cannabis. There are a variety of elements that a lot of patients in the UK and globally should be having free access to medical cannabis on their national health systems. The United States, as I discussed, the issues within the United States, apart from those points, and which I point out on the slide, is that you get this disconnect where, yes, it's all legal, yes, we're raising taxes, so you'll hear a lot of people talk about, isn't it great, it'll be great for the economy, we can tax it, but they're taxing it at 70%. So how are those businesses going to evolve and create more innovation if they're taxed to the high hill, right? So it's about creating that balance. Portugal, not so far away, and it runs through my blood. We celebrate Portugal. There's a lot of discussion about Portugal being the California state of Europe because of all their internal indoor grow facilities and so on and so forth. They have a very similar issue to the UK. Again, there's only 4 or 5 patients in the whole of Portugal receiving medical cannabis. Now, Portugal is a small country, circa 10 or 11 million population totally, but surely it's not only 5 patients that could benefit from medical cannabis in Portugal. And then we've got France, our dear neighbours in France. They're pushing for this pilot scheme, which started a few years ago, introducing medical cannabis. They've extended the pilot scheme, I think, until next year. It's a good idea. In their pilot scheme, they've indicated that flower will not be seen as medical cannabis, which, whether you agree with it or not, it's a sensible approach to create a disconnect or a division between medical and adult use. Because from my perspective, what I was just saying, everybody could benefit from medical cannabis. There are a lot of patients out there that have never touched cannabis. So we need to create products that the general public will see as medical, and they also recognize that that's adult use. And there should be, and that will help also policymakers and politicians to ease into the discussion a bit more easily, rather than say, is it just recreational use coined as medical, right? So we have to sometimes play to the elephant in the room, as the English would say, and appease them a little bit by creating those sort of visions of identifying products. And it makes it easier for the regulator to regulate as well, right? Because one is medical, and it's being prescribed by a doctor, and the doctor needs to know if it's working. And the other one is adult use. Like anything else that's adult use, we should be able to just go out there and take it with regards to the right risk notices on it. Right, the missed opportunities in global capital. I just wanted to highlight this graph here because it's misleading, and that's the reason I put it there. It shows that, I've realised. It shows that the purchase price for medical cannabis or per patient is about 3,800 euros. This is taken from 2024. That's all good and well, but we've only got about 40,000 patients. In Germany, it's about 1,500 euros, but your patient levels are a lot higher, right? So Germany, this graph is completely useless because people look at that and think, oh, UK is doing really well. It's not. It's a misconception. Despite the global capital readiness in investing in the legal cannabis market, regulatory inertia in the UK and US leads to missed opportunities, right? I highlighted POCA, but there's more than just POCA, right? If you look at what I discussed a moment ago between federal and state level, you've got federal banking restrictions in the United States preventing cannabis businesses from accessing traditional banking methods. So if they need a loan for their business, or they need investment, or they need credit, they have to go to what we call challenger banks. They have to go to angel investors, they have to go to friends and families, whatever it is. The interest on that is going to be a lot higher than a normal business owner going to a bank asking for investment. These restrictions contribute to operational challenges and create vulnerabilities for businesses operating in cash-heavy environments. Tax codes, like I mentioned before, taxing them 70%, all good for the economy, but not great for the business. There needs to be that balance. Let's not just tax them to the hill and push them into a corner where they can't survive. That is also not good for businesses. There's also something that people forget about. A lot of these grow facilities and businesses also need insurance, and so dealing with that insurance barriers is very difficult. Look, there's a lot to go on, and I could talk. Look, I didn't have much time, but there's a lot of recommendations. Look, we could change the Banking Act, we can change POCA, we can implement the Safer Banking Act, create international quality and standards. But one thing I always say to the industry, what we need more of, and I coined this phrase, is THC, transparency, harmonization, and collaboration, because only by doing that will the industry improve, by educating everybody else around them. So look, thank you for a very short presentation, but thank you so much for listening.